Hi guys, it's Brooke here. I have a super quick favor to ask. When you have a moment, please take just a second to give this podcast a 5-star review. This will help me to continue the podcast and continue to bring these resources to the community. Thank you so much for that 5-star review.
If you have significant hearing, like auditory sensitivities, that can make things so incredibly difficult. I know people who can hear electricity in the walls. So imagine being in an environment with lots of ambient sound in it and lots of people contributing to that ambient sound. It is going to become very uncomfortable. So the more we know about areas of sensitivity that somebody has, either hypersensitivity, like oversensitivity, or undersensitivity, because that's also a thing, it just gives us more information to help make people comfortable.
Hey there, it's Brooke, and welcome to Finding Hope on the Spectrum, where I have heart-to-heart conversations with parents, professionals, and autistic individuals sharing personal insight and life experiences. Together, we dive deep into supports, programs, and stories that offer inspiration, insight, and most importantly, hope for the neurodiverse community. Before we begin with today's topic, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. And if you know someone who this would be helpful for, please pass it along. Remember to always stay curious, be kind, and have an open heart. All right. Well, I am very excited about this conversation today. I know that I'm going to learn a lot just from our special guest that we have, and I'm really excited to share a little bit more about Dr. Deborah Budding, and I'm going to introduce her first, and then we'll get going in our topic, and we're going to be talking about the cerebellum and regulation and neuro-affirming understanding of autism, which is a fantastic new focus that I haven't had on the show thus far, and so I'm excited. It's an expansion on some of the shows, but definitely excited to talk more about the cerebellum and learn about that. So Dr. Deborah Budding is a board-certified neuropsychologist who works with children, adolescents, and adults in the Los Angeles area. She has a background in literature, specifically poetry and magazine publishing, prior to earning her PhD in psychology. She is a co-author of Subcortical Structures and Cognition, Implications for Neuropsychological Assessment, which was published in 2008, as well as peer-reviewed articles related to subcortical contributions to cognitive and emotional function, including a consensus paper on cerebellar contributions to both movement and cognition, published in 2013, and a book chapter on executive function, published in 2022. She has strong interest in neurodiversity, neuroscience, intersectionality, art, music, and video games, and not necessarily in that order. So welcome, Deb.
Thank you. I know. How did a poetry major become a neuropsychologist?
I know that. I would love to hear that story.
My mentor wondered that as well. He said, "Oh, I figured you'd publish something, although this was not what I was expecting."
Yes, absolutely. Well, we're grateful for your contributions to the field. So glad you took this path.
Well, I think one of the things that's very helpful for me as a neuropsychologist is that I have such a broad background and such broad interests. I've always said for psychologists, if all you know is psychology, it's going to be harder to relate to people and to help them. So
Sure.
I do think having a broad range of interests is important, especially for the fact that I play video games and I understand them. Extremely helpful because I'm a pediatrics person. So It really helps to have a real understanding of who I'm working with. So,
Absolutely.
you know, when somebody is talking to me about Fortnite or whatever, I know what they're talking about. I personally don't play Fortnite. I'm more of a role-playing game kind of person, but I know the game. And so, And one of the things, and we didn't really talk about this in advance, but one of the things I have found with the neurodivergent kids that I work with is that a lot of them do play video games. A lot of them do spend a fair amount of time on electronics. And I don't view that as inherently bad, but I do view it as something to be regulated.
Yeah, absolutely. That is like a whole topic to discuss.
Yeah, it's definitely a whole like separate deal. But I do think that when you are neurodivergent of whatever flavor, And brains don't read the DSM, so we like to pile things neatly into ADHD, autism, OCD, etc.
Right.
Brains don't care about that. Bodies don't really care about that. So I tend to think more broadly in terms of neurodivergence and how an individual person might differ in terms of their basic wiring from what is currently considered typical within society.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
there is to some degree a cultural component in what we consider to be atypical, but those differences often are based on sensory motor differences. And so this is one of the reasons why I tend to focus much more on sensory motor function when I'm doing an assessment than on kind of top-down cognitive thinky things per se. Not that they aren't important, but when your body is in fight flight, your thinking mind isn't available to you.
Absolutely. And I know I want to go dive deep into that and kind of talk about what happens in those situations for these clients that you're serving. And, I think after we talked initially, I really kind of wanted to set the stage for this bigger picture thinking to kind of set the stage for this conversation that as you're helping your families understand their child with autism and, how the brain and nervous system works from your perspective. And I can't wait for you to share more about that. How does that change the way that they see their child and themselves?
Well, one, I don't think autism just appeared out of nowhere. In my experience, a lot of times families have members, adults, parents, grandparents who, if they're not autistic themselves, have at least some features and they're just not aware of it. It's sort of like the cartoon they have about the guy going, I don't know all this autism stuff that's everywhere. Now get out of the way while I do my train set, So
Right.
I just don't view autism as inherently pathological. I do think disability obviously can come along with it, but there are lots of different ways that we can be wired, right? So if you think about somebody's behavior as being driven by their neurology interacting with the environment, oftentimes in an unconscious way, it takes some of the blame away. Also, we know, those of us who do, interventions, we know that you cannot punish a child out of a meltdown. You cannot reward a child out of a meltdown, that this is sort of a moment of crisis for a neurological system. So a lot of the work we do is finding ways to head off experiences of dysregulation. And then also in advance, as much as possible, to come up with plans that help to re-regulate somebody as quickly as possible when they get dysregulated.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's really going beyond the behavior and looking at the nervous system and understanding what's happening for that individual.
Right. And a lot of times we don't know, like when I do assessments, I like to look at, I'm not an OT, obviously, but I do like to look at sensory motor function to some degree. And oftentimes I will refer for a full occupational therapy evaluation, which looks at sensory motor function, or they will have already been to an occupational therapist and had that kind of assessment. And then I can use that as a jumping off point to help explain some of the other kind of neurocognitive things that we see and link them to what was seen in terms of the person's sensory motor function, right? If you have significant hearing, like auditory sensitivities, that can make things so incredibly difficult. I know people who can hear electricity in the walls.
Yeah.
So imagine being in an environment with lots of ambient sound in it and lots of people contributing to that ambient sound. It is going to become very uncomfortable. So the more we know about areas of sensitivity that somebody has, either hypersensitivity, like oversensitivity, or undersensitivity, because that's also a thing, it just gives us more information to help make people comfortable.
Yeah, I find it so interesting as you're sharing that too, thinking those individuals that can hear the electricity in the walls probably also are not aware necessarily that that is such a distraction and that doesn't have to be. Right, there are things that can be done to help calm
and
that
not
down.
Everybody has that.
Yeah,
that sensitivity. I
Right.
mean, I routinely screen for synesthesia, the kind where you see colors and numbers mixed together, because I had found that there were times I would be working with a child and they were not identified as having that particular type of synesthesia, but they were having reading problems. And there's a certain task I do that's like a rapid naming task, and I will ask first, so are these numbers and letters black and white, or do you see colors? And sometimes people will say, oh yeah, well, the one is light blue and the two is pink, right?
Wow.
And the letters will have their own numbers or colors. So it can be very distracting when you're trying to read.
Yes.
It can help your
Absolutely.
spelling though, because the people I know with that type of synesthesia can look at a word and tell if the colors are blended right.
Wow.
See if the spelling's right,
That
which
is-
I think
wow.
is mind blowing. But it's also helped me really respect the massive differences there are between people. There's certainly a lot of similarities. There's cultural differences. There's, one of the reasons I'm interested in intersectionality is how there are so many ways that we are different from each other, that they're important and that intersect with each other in terms of how we experience the environment. I suppose I should back up and say my training, aside from the poetry training, my training in neuropsychology and neuroscience is very much from an action perspective. So neuroscientists like Paul Chizik are very, very important to me and my understanding of things. And one of the important aspects of that is the understanding that brains evolved primarily for the purpose of movement. That thinking has been this delightful thing that has come along with it, but that initially, very early on, brains evolved in order to move towards sustenance, to move away from danger. And so within human beings, there is this very kind of primitive core of this single-celled organism that is trying to avoid painful things and trying to get toward pleasant things. And this is largely non-conscious. And one of the reasons the cerebellum is important is that it plays a huge role in making stuff automatic. So if you, for example, being able to tell the difference very quickly between a stick and a snake, right? That is very subcortically driven. That's basal ganglia and that's cerebellum. And that's being able to do categorization, right? You have to be able to look carefully and determine if this object is dangerous or not. Because if it's a snake and you think it's a stick,
Right.
oops,
The problem.
right? And, on the other hand, though, if you're constantly in a situation where you're perceiving danger where it's not, that is a problem. And that's where, from a neuroscience perspective, one of the ways we think about anxiety is seeing danger where danger isn't.
Yeah.
And so, again, if we look at it as adaptive in some way, that takes the blame away, because sometimes you're like, oh God, are you going to make a big deal about this again? And so if that, whatever that thing is, that's a deal, right? And especially with autistic kids who are very routine dependent for a lot of reasons, when somebody gets upset, when their routine is altered, we could get annoyed, or we could go, oh, right. You're used to a particular routine and your brain has limited other models internally to switch to, which causes distress. Brains operate on this continuum of novelty and familiarity, right? Novelty takes more energy to be able to problem solve around it. If something is familiar, you can put it into background processing, do it automatically, and we just count on being able to do that, human beings, right? Like you learn how to think about when you first learned how to drive. You had to literally think about every single aspect of it, right? But at some point, it becomes so automatic. If you're not thinking about it, if you're way changes that day, you pass your exit on the freeway because you were automatically going someplace else.
Right.
So we really do depend a lot on automaticity for a lot of the things we do in terms of adaptive day-to-day skills. So the cerebellum is deeply involved in making things automatic. And the research is pretty clear that there are some fundamental differences in neurodivergent brains in terms of cerebellar development. So whatever flavor you're talking about, ADHD, autism, whatever, the cerebellum has an important part to play in differences. One of the reasons I like to talk about differences as opposed to abnormality is, the literature is filled with very pathologizing language, and I find it not great, because something being different doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong or bad or broken. It doesn't mean disability doesn't exist. Disability is absolutely real. But I think if we can focus more on where is the breakdown happening in a moment by moment basis that allows somebody to feel that going on being comfort, when that breaks down and somebody is in distress, as a parent, certainly, or as any adult, working with a particularly kid, but adults too, you want to help bring that person back down to whatever their base comfort level is, because being physically uncomfortable can be so devastating. And if you have sensory sensitivities, it just makes that discomfort worse.
Yeah.
Which is why I don't like using aversive techniques for people engaging in self-harm behaviors. I think if somebody is in enough difficulty that they're banging their head, I want to know what's hurting to the extent they can tell you, right? Because there's obviously communication issues.
Right.
But some people just make habits more easily than others.
Yeah.
That's just fact. And so one of the things I try to figure out with people is, okay, is it easy for you to make a habit? Because for some people, it really is. They can get something new and then they can just fit it into their repertoire and then just do that thing.
Right.
But for a lot of people, it is very difficult. And here it is, the new year, right? Everybody's got their New Year's resolutions.
Right.
We can talk about, is that so easy?
Right. Yeah. It's pretty challenging, I would say, for most people.
For most people. And for autistic kids, I often find their routines are so important to them, and being able to have an expectability about what's happening. And one of the things the cerebellum does is it builds these models of expectation. If I do this, this will happen. It's one of the reasons why you can reach for a glass and actually hit the glass, right?
Right.
So there is a thing called ataxia, where you have like overshooting or undershooting in terms of your movement. And the same thing is actually real for emotion and cognition. We only think of the cerebellum usually as movement, but there's overshooting and undershooting and rate, rhythm, and force issues for emotion, and for action, for behavior, and for thinking. So you can overshoot. There's a very famous neurologist named Jeremy Schmahmann who has developed his sort of cerebellar theory of emotional challenges, cerebellar cognitive affective syndrome, something like CCAS, but they've shortened it to Schmahmann syndrome. But it has to do with people who have cerebellar damage, who don't really have a lot of movement problems, but they have developed certain kinds of psychiatric related difficulties, such as emotional volatility and problems thinking, like getting sticky or having trouble staying on course. Like if you see kids who have trouble having an inside voice, right? Those kids who they can't monitor, that's overshooting.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, a lot of these things you're describing, I see in so many of our clients with autism.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating that it's tied to the cerebellum. It's not something that I was ever trained in.
personally.
No, nobody has. Well, and I mean, you use your whole brain for everything, really.
Yeah,
But
right.
the idea that certain parts of the brain are only for certain things is really very old, and it's based on a very static view of what brains do and are, instead of a dynamic view. Is, why I enjoy current action-oriented neuroscientists work, because it's all about interacting with the environment, because that's what we do. We're always interacting with the environment, and the environment includes the people in it, includes the natural environment. I mean, think about classroom environments and how much of a difference it can make when you've got students with sensory sensitivities and you don't have the overhead big light on.
Right.
Right? When you don't have the crackling fluorescent light.
Flashing, yes. Those lights.
And instead, there's more soft natural light, or there's, or you go to Home Depot and you get floor lamps to use instead. But the physical environment is part of what we are interacting with. And so everything in that environment matters. So this is why I like a sensory motor approach, because it is dynamic, because it's non-pathologizing. It's not like there's something wrong with you. It's like, what's the fit between you and your environment? And within a family, there can be people with very different wirings. And sometimes those wirings can be clashy with each other.
Right. It's hard.
And it can be really hard until it can be taken out of the, especially with kids with some, demand avoidance. So we also, have had some discussions about, kids, a lot of times kids with demand avoidance, and the parents just like, oh, God, will you just do the thing? Like, will you just do the thing? And the kid's like, well, I was going to do the thing, but now that you've asked, no.
Right. Yes. Yes.
And, and so there can be a lot of distress within a family system when there are clashy neurologies happening with each other. And so to give people a framework that falls alongside effort, doing things on purpose, because again, we can do things on purpose to bug each other. It's a very, get a nice little dopamine pop by getting someone to lose their temper with you, certainly. Again, a lot of these things are not consciously driven.
Yeah. I think that's what's the most significant, is that it's not, it takes the judgment away.
Right.
And, helps you get to the root of what's happening to support that individual.
Right.
And
when it feels like, when the environment feels like it's impinging on you, okay?
Yeah.
It starts to eat away at your feelings of autonomy.
Yeah.
And so then when you have, these big giant grown-ups telling you what to do, that also eats away at autonomy. And so a lot of what we do is bring some autonomy back into the relationship and have some communication that has to do with understanding and respecting each other, even though, there is a hierarchy involved, but it doesn't, a hierarchy doesn't have to be negative.
Right. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Especially if we treat people kindly, and focus less on coercion and more on, here's this thing that needs to get done. How are we going to get it done? And whether that thing is homework or picking which shirt to wear, which can take up a whole morning to do that. So it makes you sort of, you have to be more flexible yourself, I think, as sort of the adult in the situation. And a lot of times parents have our own areas of rigidity and our own autistic traits and our own ADHD impulsivities and things that we have to be working with in relation to the little person that we're trying to get out the door to whatever we're trying to get them to do.
Right. Absolutely. And you have to keep that in mind as, it resonates so much with the work that we do with RDI and how we are focusing on these things of helping our families be able to really understand what's happening for their child and then guide them as opposed to focusing on compliance.
Right.
It's, giving them opportunity to be set up for success and to be competent through the relationship.
And to feel validated in their own individual experience of, whatever that individual experience is, to feel validated within it and to not be made to feel like there's something wrong with you, like you're broken, you're weird. That is such an issue, especially with the autistic teens I see. They've had experiences of social failure and misunderstanding. And I consider it a two-way street with communication. So, whatever is neurotypical a thing? I don't know. I'm not even sure whether people we think are neurotypical just mask better. But the idea is if people aren't understanding each other, it's sort of a two-way street. How do we help them understand each other better? Not how do we make this person who's been given a label of some sort try to act quote unquote normal.
Right. I think that it can be so potentially traumatizing and damaging to try to teach that person to act normal.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's important as our field is growing and evolving, just to have that awareness, and the support of those individuals to be honored and respected as important.
Right. Well, and also to feel comfortable. I mean, what I keep coming back to sensory issues, because no matter what area I look at with the people I'm working with, I don't know how many ARFID cases you see, which is avoidant restrictive. It's sort of an eating disorder associated with autism that has to do with a lot of times with sensory issues and rigidity around what kinds of foods one will eat. And that sensory kind of issue is a big deal, and it's real. I know people who just cannot tolerate certain smells. They cannot tolerate certain textures, and getting into power struggles over, eating something it's such a colossal waste of time ultimately, and it damages the relationship.
Of course. I know. And I've seen that in the field. It's kind of crazy that it can go on, and it's just not effective. It just does not work.
I mean, I just think coercion, you can only get so far with coercion. And at the end of the day, it's not going to be anywhere good. If you teach a child to bend to coercion, at the end of the day, it may make your life easier, but that child is going to have a really hard time saying no in situations that could put them in danger later.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. And that is, that's a scary place to be.
You want people to have a sense of their own, body boundaries. And one of the things that's difficult for a lot of neurodivergent people is that interoception, that sense of what's going on inside and recognizing internal body signals. So there's, significant sensory sensitivities on the one hand, but there's also not always an internal vocabulary for what's going on inside.
Yeah.
Which, again, this is one of the reasons why I have so much respect for occupational therapy as a modality for neurodivergent people, because it really is a way of helping people to feel comfortable. I do a lot of late identification, ID of ADHD, autism, etc. And a lot of the people I see are women. And by the time I see them, they've been masking so hard for so long that they're in complete burnout.
Yeah.
And the sensory issues that they've been masking against feeling contributes a tremendous amount to that degree of burnout.
Absolutely. It's exhausting.
This show is brought to you by Therapeutic Approach to Growth. Therapeutic Approach to Growth helps families with relationship and behavioral needs. Their holistic programs are individualized to honor and respect each family and their autistic son or daughter's sense of self through programs such as relationship development intervention, naturalistic ABA, and animal-assisted services. If you're finding yourself frustrated or discouraged with your current behavioral programs and would like to see more long-term meaningful growth for you and your family, then contact TAG today at www.tagforgrowth, that's TAGFORGROWTH.com, to learn more about how to schedule a consultation or how they can offer you the help your family needs, whether in person, remotely, or in a school setting. Again, that's www.tagforgrowth.com.
It is draining and causes fatigue, and it's interesting that it's more women. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, culturally, I think women are just taught to mask better. I think there's more of an expectation that women will sort of fit in. I also think that the traditional view of autism is a white boy who flaps and spins and doesn't talk. That's the textbook, autism definition, but it's really so much broader than that. Mm-hmm. And there's such a wide range of ability and disability that can go along with that, one of the reasons I'm not that into the level 1, level 2, et cetera, is that functionally those sort of labels are meaningless for me and in terms of understanding a person and helping them be more comfortable. Mm. Because to some degree, areas of disability are dynamic. And depending on what the environment is demanding of a person, they're going to have an easier or harder time meeting whatever those demands are.
Yeah.
So
true.
It's very environmentally dependent. So that's why, to me, having a classroom setting or a home setting that is sensory friendly is going to set the stage for, in general, things being more comfortable. I mean, you're still going to get discord if you were planning on serving broccoli and you switch it to asparagus. Like, that's on you. You have to know. Like, a lot of people do not love the spontaneity, and so that's one reason why houses with people who have like very ADHD neurologies, along with people who are more autistic in their neurology, can be clashy because there's a lot of kind of opposites going on there. And especially if you've got both kinds of neurologies going on, that can be really challenging.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you've got the part of you that's like constantly wanting something new and exciting, and the part of you that's like, oh God, no, not anything new. I can't handle it.
I can't imagine. That sounds really hard.
It's not the best. It's, I mean, it has its benefits, obviously, like anything, but it can make things difficult, and nothing is ever that simple, right? Like, there's nothing about any one autistic person, I think, that is completely similar with everybody else, other than I can usually guarantee that there's going to be sensitivity to unexpected change. That's pretty much across the board an issue for people. The more you can front load somebody with expectations for, okay, this is what's going to happen, there still may be distress around change, but there won't be so much looping around this thing is different, this thing is different. Right. And with helping people be more flexible with change, a lot of it is explicit. You just have to be as explicit as possible, because with learning new behavioral repertoires, we'll say, like with learning new things to do, there was this old saying that autistic people like couldn't learn new things. And the problem had more to do with implicit learning and just looking at the environment, figuring out what it wanted, and then doing it. And it's more about making things explicit. Every autistic person I know will say the thing that drives them crazy about dealing with neurotypical people is, why won't people say what they mean?
Interesting.
Why won't people be direct?
Yes. Just explain it.
Tell me what you want. Just tell me what you want. I'll be doing it. But they then oftentimes are experienced as being oppositional when they're just asking for clarification.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you provide that in advance, then you're setting them up for success and
Right.
explaining.
And if you know that somebody asking you questions is not like defying your authority, but is literally trying to clarify what is it you're asking them either to do or to explain. So it doesn't, again, it takes it away from feeling personally attacked.
Right. Yeah,
And
they're
it
just trying to help themselves understand better.
Right. It just becomes a situation where, okay, this is a communication problem, right? So how do we fix it?
Yeah,
Instead of,
absolutely.
How do you fix that? How do you fix the person? And it becomes, how do you understand how somebody operates in the world better so that things can be more comfortable? And this is why I like interventions kind of like DBT that focus on, finding different ways to express feelings when you have them, helping to understand what your feelings are when you're having them. So a lot of people, they don't have a language for the sensory experiences happening inside.
Right.
And then
that's a huge challenge.
Right. And then if they don't have a language, trying to create models to have expectations for things. And again, when you're looking at somebody who has trouble modulating rate, rhythm, and force, if you can think about it in terms of, is this kind of a cerebellar thing instead of, why is this person trying to ruin my day?
Yeah.
It can just shift things a little bit, and you can go, oh, okay, this is a modulation problem. Let's see what we can do to help soften that up some. And some people literally don't recognize like what an inside voice is versus an outside voice.
Right. Absolutely. And that's just the beginning, right? That's the case. And they're going to probably have that's going to lead into other areas.
They're very intense in terms of the emotional response to something. And you're like, why are you flipping out? This is not a big deal. And they may not even recognize that they're like coming across as very intense emotionally.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. I have a client that's been working on that for some time and making great progress, but it takes time and self-awareness and
And if you
reflection.
Think about it as a brain, as a thing, as a body thing, as opposed to this is something wrong with you. It just, it takes some of the shame away. And I think that's like incredibly important in dealing with people. I just, so I have very strong feelings about how we talk about autism, how we talk about ADHD. I'm not that interested in the causes or cures for it. Everybody I know who's autistic doesn't want to be cured, but they would really like their sensory issues to be, helped. They would really like to be less anxious, but they would not like to not be autistic. And so this whole like cure stuff, and I'm not talking about people with epilepsy, right? There's a whole like range of medical issues that can be co-occurring with autism. And I'm not talking about that. I think, definitely having epilepsy is not great for your brain. And that's something that needs treatment. When you treat your epilepsy, you'll still be an autistic person with controlled epilepsy. So it's a matter of viewing, because some people think that neurodiversity means that you don't believe in disability, right? And that's just not true. The disability just is a fact. It's dynamic. And for some people, it depends, again, on the setting they're in. But there's a whole lot of things that people are able to do when the environment is made friendlier to some of their sensory motor comforts.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And everybody should have the right to feel comfortable. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Like doing animal assisted therapy, right? I think part of why it's often so successful is that it's nonverbal, but it's sort of helping to, if you're an overshooter, you can't be jumping toward that animal. You have to learn how to soften, your movements. Right.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you're around horses, animals that are flight animals, those that you have to, or it could be very dangerous. And it just creates such an authentic experience to, be able to modulate your responses because you have to for safety.
Exactly.
So the stakes are
Exactly.
high.
Well, and this is why I love body-based somatic kinds of interventions that aren't only, I mean, I'm not an anti-talk therapy person by any stretch, but it's not enough to talk
Right.
about things. You also have to be able to do
Right.
and to be in your body and
Mm-hmm.
to have a sense of what that means. A lot of, again, I do a lot of late identification. And one of the issues that comes up a lot with the people I see, again, it's mostly women. It's not only women, both cis and trans women, but also it's people feel like a dissociation. They whether they've been diagnosed with a dissociative disorder of some kind or not, there's a sense of not being in your body.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just talking does not suffice with, you've got to have some level of somatic work going on, whatever, when you pick. And there's also the issue of trauma, which is a whole separate conversation, but is often relevant, especially for late diagnosed people who've had a lot of social failures and interpersonal misattunements and traumas, that there's going to be a layer.
Yeah, for sure.
Of complex PTSD that's going on with that.
Yeah.
And, again, I don't view people as like brains in jars. I think that, we inhabit bodies and our bodies are interacting with the environment. So it's a whole system of viewing people that just includes bodies more fully and considers our brains as being part of our bodies and our nervous system.
Right.
And, being in fight flight, unpleasant.
Yeah, I think it would be good to talk about the patterns too, because I know we had talked about patterns, and as we were thinking about, the animal therapy, and I was thinking, the patterns that we establish when I was working with a pony with the clients, that we were working on, really help with that movement. And even what I found too is how powerful is just even observation sometimes with noticing your partner. Sometimes I just do that. Sometimes I'm just saying, okay, your role is just to watch, and I'm going to show you. And next time you're going to have an opportunity to try. So just to allow the nervous system to not feel the demand and to observe and recognize that pattern of movement.
And a lot of autistic people I know prefer to stand back and watch something being done repeatedly before jumping in and trying it.
Right. Yeah. I love that technique. I feel like so many people, parents especially, feel like their child's not doing something.
Oh, they're doing something.
They're doing a lot.
They're doing a lot. There's a lot going on inside there.
Yeah.
And also, I think, we were talking a little bit about, the fight flight mechanisms. People who tend to flight or freeze or fawn are usually seen more compassionately than the fighters.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
And I oftentimes, I'll get a referral from a school or whatever, and this will be, and oftentimes it's a boy, but not always, will get aggressive. And my stance is always sort of, okay, back up. What happened? And this, when somebody's in a state of fight flight, and if their style is more of a protect yourself, right? Like your reality may not be that you're about to get killed, but the internal experience is that you're fighting for your life.
Yeah.
And so whether, depending on what your style is, you're going to fall into that mechanism of self-protection. Yeah. And a lot of times, with girls especially, I find the fawning response is a big part of masking.
What is the fawning response?
So fawning, fawning is like, oh, you're so wonderful, and oh, everything about you is so great. Okay. It's that sort of, please don't hit me. I think you're wonderful. Please don't be mean to me. That
interesting
response. And it's very powerful and very hard to get someone out of doing it once they're once that's their safety mechanism. And so they're when you're doing psychopathy, it's the so agreeable.
Yeah. Right.
Always very agreeable, very pleasant, not at all oppositional. And so for some people, like teaching them how to fight can be really important.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? Incredible. I never thought about that as a way to protect yourself.
Yeah.
To help yourself feel comfortable.
Yeah. It's partly because in sort of white American culture, there are certain expectations that we all absorb, right? Mm-hmm. One of them is civility and being positive in certain ways. And that is an expectation that is unconsciously absorbed by people.
Yeah.
So again, when I'm thinking about doing intersectional work, I'm always trying to think about what are some cultural differences that are inherited either by dominant culture or by minoritized people and how that impacts them, because those differences are there and people can choose to pay attention to them or not.
Yeah,
clearly. But I think part of the neurodiversity movement has been to also, make space for people of all stripes. And again, the physical comfort piece, I keep coming back to that because I was seeing somebody yesterday who had a very high anxiety, and I gave them do you know about little ouchies? So little ouchies they're a sensory toy that's spiky. So it's for pain stimming, and it doesn't break your skin, but it's really good for people when they're distressed about something, will like pick their skin or pull their hair.
Yeah.
Headbang, right? And it has just enough. I've got a little one right here.
Okay.
They're like 3D printed plastic, and they have softer ones and harder ones, but they give enough feedback to help you concentrate and also to kind of take your mind away from doing whatever kind of self-harm stimming that you're about to do. So it's not a coercive method. It's like, here's a tool.
Yeah.
See if this thing that you can squeeze or roll between your hands helps take away the focus on whatever the sensory discomfort is.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I mean, that makes so much sense.
I'll send you a link so you can put it in the show notes.
Perfect. That'd be great.
They're really cheap too, which I also love.
Yeah, I think I have clients that would benefit from that. Would you say that is for the clients that say they hit their head because they have a headache? That's kind of what they're doing. They're controlling the pain.
Right. It's anytime I see somebody engaging in a self-harming behavior, I'm thinking, what is the internal experience that is so bad that this is preferable?
Yeah. Yeah. And such a compassionate way to see it.
And what can we do to help offload that discomfort? Because a headache is terrible.
Yeah. Right.
I don't recommend having a headache. And it's not something you can look at somebody and see, right? there's no like blinking light saying headache happening. And so, right. And this is the case for so much of neurocognitive stuff, like processing speed, for example, right? And attention. There's no blinking light that goes on to say, I am encoding what you're saying.
Right.
Right. So you have no way of knowing if the person's encoding the third of every 3 sentences you give.
Right.
Right. And then they don't follow the instructions. And then you think they're being oppositional when in fact they didn't absorb the first 2 of the 3 things you said.
Right. Well, it's always, we always say like err on the side of, assuming that they're going to make the right choice if they can.
If they can, assuming competence, right?
Yeah.
So and asking questions can be difficult because for a lot of neurodivergent people, questions can feel threatening. Like that can be like, if you know how that goes, right? If you ask a question, sometimes that can put somebody into fight.
Right. Absolutely.
So sometimes instead of saying, how are you feeling? You could say, oh, like right now I'm like, my hand's itching. Do you have any sensory icks happening currently for yourself? And teaching language around that can be super helpful. I mean, just somebody learning to say that something is icky to them and that it's okay can make a big difference. I mean, I just think of the amount of fighting over getting through a meal people have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's huge. And that's a big thing that we do a lot in our work is declarative communication and invitational communication, and how effective it is. It really works incredibly well and quickly, most of the time, very quickly.
Yeah.
It's a shift in that style of communication.
And if you think of it from a brain perspective about how somebody's processing information, again, I think it helps people absorb it better and also accept it, right?
Yeah.
Especially if what you're suggesting is very different from whatever the family culture is used to doing. They're saying, hey, I did what I was told, or else, I got the belt, right? Like when you have certain like authoritarian histories within families trying to help describe taking more collaborative as opposed to coercive approach, trying to explain it using brain-based language can make it easier to accept.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes a long way, and it's incredibly effective, and it just feels good, for everybody. Everybody
I
feels
feel
better.
like people like to feel good, and
Yes.
I what is wrong with that? I just think,
I know.
it's okay to feel good and to be happy. These things are okay.
Yes.
We
Yeah,
needn't
I
be
know.
miserable.
Right. I know. And then it can be empowering for families to say, oh, wow, I have a tool that really works, and I can really be that person for my child. It sets them up for success.
And to really understand the amount of pain that people with sensory sensitivities can be in, that, if somebody's covering their ears and you're looking at them like, what is the problem, right?
Right.
There is a fundamental difference in how that auditory system is wired. And there's some pretty good research on differences, especially in auditory processing among autistic people, that oftentimes auditory stimuli doesn't habituate. So for me, I have more of an ADHD kind of neurology, and I was doing a presentation with a colleague who's autistic, and we were sort of laughing about differences in neurologies, and she was talking about the music that the hotel was pumping into the room, and she was like, and I can't stop hearing that music, and I was like, what music? Because
Wow. Yeah.
I just tuned it right out.
Yeah.
And some of us can tune things out really well, and some of us cannot.
Yeah.
And that is, if you imagine the difference, if you've got these two people,
Right.
and so who's lying?
Right. Yes. Yes. That's the mindset shift, to have that awareness. Everybody has their own journey and life experience and life path. Yes.
Right.
Yes. I love that.
I just think, to me, awareness is such a big, it's a big issue. And awareness isn't everything, because you do have to learn how to do things differently. But I do think that just more awareness is always good. And I just think the way that we are trained in our fields still is a little behind in how we're taught to understand things. And so I feel it's important to try to, educate people who do the things that we do about new things in neuroscience. Because once it's a pain in the butt to get trained and licensed, right? And now you're like, oh, I'm not going to have to read a book again for a while, but in what I do, I have to be, fortunately I have, my special interest is brains and video games. So I can read, I can read neuroscience literature all day and I'm a happy camper. Most people are not me. So I understand that is not like a favorite hobby, but that's why I'm here. That's why that's why I like to give talks and do trainings and talk about these things, because for me, it's fun to keep up with it. And then I can do the translation and sort of make it understandable for other professionals and for parents, because parents in my experience are really hungry to find ways to help everybody be more comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the way that you share it is so digestible and, makes so much sense. It's hard to deny once you understand.
It is. It's, and when I'm doing trainings for people, I'm like, I'm about to take everything you've learned and turn it upside down. So just be prepared for vertigo for a little bit. But, once you think about it, it will start making sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's important. Yeah, it does make sense. And it is important because we are dealing with humans and they're dynamic, and we have to make these adjustments so we can better support the people we're serving.
Right.
And, we have to just be in that mindset.
Like at some point we should talk a little bit about sort of ideas about use of technology and playing video games and iPads and things like that, and how to do that in a way that doesn't build addictive behavior, but is because there is a real need to hyperfocus when you're overstimulated. And so how do you find things to do to hyperfocus on that doesn't turn itself into a problem, right? Where you're doing a hyperfocusing activity to help calm yourself down, but at a certain point it can become overstimulating itself.
Yeah. Well, I would love to have you back on if you would be open to it, to just talk about that topic alone. That's huge. I was, their client base, and it's a struggle for families and knowing how to navigate it. And, again, I think that I could learn something from your perspective on that too, because I'd be fascinated to hear what you'd have to share about that. It is that fine line, and how do you determine that line, and how do you go about that? So
a lot of times it's practice. A lot of times it is things going south and being a disaster, and then being able. Part of resilience, in my view, is being able to tolerate failure and to experiment and have it go sideways and be like, okay, what can we learn from this, right? For the next time, because there will be a next time.
Right.
And also develop a sense of humor. I cannot emphasize enough how important in my own family, in my work, just dealing with people, having a sense of humor is so important. And helping the people you're working with develop a sense of humor about themselves, because a lot of people have a great sense of humor until it comes to themselves, and then shame gets in the way. And so you can't go, oh, ha, 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 I did that thing again. It's like, oh, why do I suck so much? I did the same thing again. Right.
Right. Yeah. I love that.
And it can
huge.
Make a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, that is fantastic. I mean, I think it's incredibly important, and it's such a great way. We're going to have to wrap up our conversation. It went by so fast, but
time flies.
It does. But if there was one thing you could leave families or professionals that are listening, what would it be?
One, I would say stay curious. There's so much we still really don't understand about humans, animals, just nature, that we stand to learn. So to stay curious, to try to develop a sense of humor, and to understand that just because we don't understand why somebody's doing something, there may or may not be a reason they're doing it, right? I used to firmly believe that behavior is communication, but autistic friends have taught me that is not always true. Sometimes they're doing a stim or whatever just because it feels good, and they're not trying to communicate anything other than, I'm doing my thing, leave me alone. So that just to, as much as possible, to not make assumptions about what the meaning is of another person's behavior. Right? That really just, to me, is extremely important. And to be curious about it, to wonder.
Yeah, that's fantastic. If you just do that alone, the shift that you will see and the changes you'll see is huge.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. And also just being an authority is overrated. So there's collaborative work, and it's important, and doing coercive techniques with people, it can get you someplace in the short run, but in the long run, ends up not good for anybody.
Yeah, I agree completely. Well, great. Well, if people want to find you, where is the best way? And I'll include it in the show notes too, but what's the best way to find you?
I have a website that is so old and should be redone, but I'm too lazy. But so I do have a website that exists. I can be emailed. There's an email address that's on that old website that I look much younger than I am, although I still look pretty young for my age. So so I'm pretty easily reachable. Email is always a great way to catch me. And I pop up on stuff here and there on, giving talks. And I really should be better at making links to places that I've given talks. I'll try to make that one of my New Year's resolutions.
There you go. There you go. Well, if you search your name in YouTube and you'll come up. So that's another way people could find you.
Yeah.
Other podcasts you've been on and talks and things. So yeah, that's another great way to find your resources. Is I think you have a lot of great information out there.
And I'm always happy to share it. So, and thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. And anytime you want to talk about, I can talk about just about anything, honestly.
Okay.
I just like talking. So
I love it.
So thank you so much for having me. And
yes, thank you.
I hope this is an excellent year, because last year was not one. So I'm thinking this year.
We're starting it off. We're kicking it off with
2026 is our year.
It's going to be a good year. We're going to manifest that now.
Yes, for sure.
All right. Thank you so much, Deb. I love this conversation. I really appreciate your time today and definitely want to have you back. So
thank you.
I'm dancing on the edge again. The wind is calling my name. I'm dancing on the edge again. This time I'm not looking back there. You can change me, you can tell me down. I'll leave echoes in every place I find. I'll break the molds with rebels mind. I'm a hurricane of free born mind.
The information provided on this podcast is for general informational purposes only. The content shared is based on the experiences, opinions, and perspectives of the hosts and their guests and should not be construed as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment recommendations. The discussions and topics covered are intended to foster understanding and awareness of autism therapies, but are not a substitute for professional medical guidance. Before making any decisions regarding therapies or treatments, we strongly encourage you to consult with a qualified healthcare provider who can provide personalized recommendations based on your unique circumstances. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge and agree that the hosts, guests, and producers are not responsible for any consequences, damages, or outcomes arising from the use or application of any information during the show.